Brian, thank you for coming. Appreciate it, man. We just want to jump right in, and if you don't mind, I think you have a pretty cool and unique background. You kind of run through your career. Doesn't have to be super detailed, but it can be. There's no pressure as far as what got you to the point today, and then what you have going on right now. I know that you've got a hard money company here in Austin and doing some pretty big things, so it's exciting, and we want to help promote that and talk about what you're doing and what value we can add for others. So if you don't mind, just kind of jump right in.
I'll start with baseball.
Really?
Yeah.
All right.
Surprisingly, I grew up in New England, and all I cared about was sports and baseball, and obviously school. And
Boston Red Sox.
Yeah, Boston Red Sox.
Nice.
And so after I graduated high school, I went and played ball at Louisville first semester, and then I ended up leaving Louisville, and the Naval Academy baseball coach called me and said, "Hey, is this really how fast you run, your batting average, and your scores?" And I was like, "Yeah." He's like, "Why don't you come play for the Naval Academy?" And I go, "What's the Naval Academy? Never heard of it." Mm-hmm. Crazy.
Yeah.
And so I looked into it, went and visited, and I was like, "Yeah, let's go do this." So went to Naval Academy, and then from there they're like, "Well, what do you want to do now?" I was like, "Well, I can either go sit in a ship for a couple of years or go fly jets." I think I want to go fly jets, right?
And so you were playing baseball at?
Yeah.
And where is the Naval Academy?
It's up in Annapolis, Maryland.
Okay.
Yep.
There are a couple military schools there, or is it just that?
Just that one.
Okay.
So then you have West Point,
Okay.
you have the Air Force Academy.
Mm-hmm.
And so, I went and played ball for them for 4 years.
What position?
I was a center fielder.
Nice.
Which is funny because I have a terrible arm. So that's
You must be fast.
I was fast, but I quickly realized I couldn't hit a college curveball either. So. But yeah, that's ended up going to fly jets after that, and that took me all around the world and the United States, and met my wife going through the pipeline training, and I
don't know if you knew that, Alex, but flying jets, that's next level.
No, yeah, it absolutely is.
Actually, I'm a reservist now, so I go back every fix that. I go back every month and play not play. I do play. Mm-hmm. Go back and fly, and I was there yesterday. Just took a jet up. The government gave me the credit card, a couple jets. Wow. Gave me a student, said, "Hey, go fly around South Texas for a couple hours and teach this kid how to fly formation." So
wow.
So you still do a little work for the Navy, or just volunteer teaching people?
Yeah, it's just reserve stuff. I just go back whenever I can to go back and teach and train the next generation.
Is it a thrill still, or is it just?
It's definitely a thrill. Yeah. It's what I tell people is going through the training. You learn so much so fast, and everything you're doing is graded and watched over so tightly that you don't enjoy it really until you've been flying for about 5 years, and then it's like, okay, I got this down. It's people aren't watching me as intently, and then it's pure joy. I mean, it's just you just go out there. And I can't even get on a roller coaster anymore because roller coasters are boring. Like, I'll take a jet and I'll go fly up to 30,000 feet and I'll just let go of the stick and see what the jet does for the next minute and a half.
Really?
And it'll be spinning and falling. And
are you serious?
I mean, you want to talk about,
wow.
Then you go to a roller coaster like, ooh, I did a loop.
Dude, I wonder, I feel like it's such an intense thing that there's very few things that it would take 5 years to get to where you enjoy it, if that makes sense. Like, 5 years is just, you feel like you gotta have your hand on the wheel every second, and you're nervous because it's next level.
Yeah,
I don't feel like there's probably many things that are like that. You know what I'm saying? Like 5 years to get comfortable, like really that comfortable.
Yeah, no, there's not a lot. 'Cause I can tell you one of the hardest things I've ever done is try to land on the back of an aircraft carrier, and I practice a lot to do that, and it's still hard to this day. So.
Wow.
What makes it so hard? Just because it's narrow, you can't miss. You're going to the ocean, or
I mean, you're doing 150 miles an hour. The wind's blowing to the left. The boat's moving to the right. The sea's going up and down. People are screaming at you from the deck, which way to if you're high, you're low. I mean, So every jet feels a little different. So some you have to add more power and less power. Just the boat driving through the ocean creates these big winds that like push your jet up and down. So even if you have everything suitcases, you're coming down, as you get closer to the ship, they have what's called the burble. It pushes you up and that sucks you down right at the end. And it changes every day. So you have to just be able to adjust to it as you're flying 150 miles. It's a controlled crash into a moving target on the ground.
I imagine you did that 100 times with somebody training you before you did on your own, or how does that?
You want to know what's crazy?
Yeah.
Is you train and train and train for it at the field. The first time you go, you're by yourself in the jet.
Really?
Yeah.
Why is that?
I don't know. Maybe no one wants to sit in the back seat.
That makes sense. Wow. So if you're coming down and things seem a little crazy, is it possible or easy to just take back off, or is it like you're committed, you make it happen at some point?
Yeah, well, no. If things don't look right, you just full power, get out of there.
Yeah.
You ever flown old planes or old jets?
I haven't.
Like
no.
World War II style, or
That sounds even scarier than what I do.
That's what I was thinking is, imagine, doing that back in the day when technology wasn't as good as it is now.
Yeah.
Like, I was watching this old war movie. I forget what it was, but it was about fighter pilots and landing on back of aircraft carriers and stuff. And it just looks intense, especially back then where, they don't have modern technology and bullets were flying at them, and just looked crazy.
That's a high.
Sounds fun though.
That's a high pressure intensity. Is that something that like was new to you, or you kind of always liked stuff like that? You liked having that pressure?
I've always been the guy that wants to go bungee jumping. Yeah. I still want, like I tell my wife, the thing I still want to do is, where they jump off the mountain with that little wingsuit.
You want to do that?
Oh, absolutely. I want to do that.
I would never, ever do that.
The squirrel suit?
Yeah. It looks fun. It sounds fun, but she told me I can't do it till the kids are at least in college.
Wow. Okay. So you did that for, you're still kind of doing that, but you were doing that at a high level for how long as far as in the Navy?
I think 10 or 12 years active duty.
Wow.
You know what always surprised me was I want you to name one job in the world where it takes you, 4 or 5 years of intense training. Mm-hmm. They put you into a piece of equipment that's probably worth over $1 million as we're launching off the front of an aircraft carrier, deployed away from your family, and you're the only one in charge of that $100 million piece of aircraft that if you make the wrong decision can affect the nation, and they pay you $80,000-$90,000. Isn't that crazy? In the real world, that would be like people are paying you millions of dollars to do that stuff.
That is really weird.
Yeah, so definitely give a high five the next time you see a veteran.
Well, with everything, now they're having the drones and all that kind of stuff. Has that changed the game a lot? It almost feels like you can just remote control these now.
Yeah, and it goes back and forth. There's the Air Force has moved a lot more towards drones and stuff like that, and our battlefield, as we're deployed, there's a lot more drones out there doing surveillance and stuff like that. So it's definitely one of those. Hey, do we need the man in the box anymore?
Right.
Or
that's what I'm wondering. Like, do you?
I'm sure there's some intuitive things that humans can do that computers can't. In the midst of a battle or in a fighter pilot situation.
Yeah. Well, that's what we keep arguing so we don't lose our jobs.
Right.
Man, and you could be. So I'm sure you trained a lot about other people coming and attacking you. In another jet and stuff like that.
Yeah.
And if you were doing that against a drone or something like that.
Well, in fact, I didn't read too much about it, but someone was telling me that maybe a month ago that they had their first air-to-air combat. It was a pilot versus a drone, and they went up, and I heard the drone won. But I think it was an Air Force pilot, so we'll...
Not a Navy pilot?
Yeah, not a Navy pilot.
That's awesome. Okay, so tell us after that, like, what was the career progression? I feel like you're having so much thrill with that. Like, how do you jump into something and get excited?
Yeah. Well, the real estate actually started when I was leaving the Naval Academy. Someone pulled me aside and said, hey, the Navy's going to move you 10, 15 times. Every time they move you, buy a house. And then when you retire, just sell all the houses and, with cash and go buy your dream house. And I was like, okay, I'll go do that. So that's how I actually got into real estate, was just owning long-term, rentals out of state.
You were just buying them and living there, and then when you'd move, you'd rent it out.
Just kind of a little house hack with the VA, because the VA gives you these awesome terms that you can buy with 0% down, stuff like that. So
how many did you collect doing that as you moved around?
Not many. I probably did it 4 times, and I was like, being an out-of-state landlord, it all depends on your property manager.
That's what I was going to ask you. If you found a manager, or how you did that.
The ones that were good were awesome. The ones that were bad were well worth just never doing it.
Right.
So, and it was tough because everyone just shows their best face when you go to talk to them as a property manager, right? They
never tell you they're going to do a bad job.
Yeah, that's true. So that's how I got into it. Plus,
were you pretty analytical with the ones you were actually buying, or were you just finding something that you liked and then you'd rent it out?
No, man, I was a teenager. I was going like, oh man, I like this place. It's close to this bar over here.
Yeah, nice.
Well, 4 is a good amount. I mean, I would imagine that most people in the military don't own 4 houses.
Yeah, well, I'm sure you are. For me, it was more the experience too. Like, I remember the first time I got a HUD, and I called my mom. And I was like, Mom, what are all these charges? She's like, oh, those are just what the bank charges. And I was like, well, why? She's like, I don't know. They just put them on there. And I was like, well, I want to know what I'm paying $500 processing fee for.
Right.
And she didn't have the answer, and no one else had the answer. Like, that's just what they charge. Mm-hmm. And so I really dug into every line on that HUD just to figure out what it actually meant and how it affected me and the house and stuff like that. So I just been a very detailed guy my whole life, and so that's the stuff that interests me and really pushed me to go further.
Okay. Yeah, and I have some questions on that later.
Okay.
About the objection thing you brought up. But let's keep going.
Okay.
So you bought those 4, you're moving around, and then what happened after that?
Well, I sold those as soon as I could because I was sick and tired of being an out-of-state landlord. But for me, when I was still active duty in South Texas, I went back to start training students. We lived in a small town. You could buy a house for $20,000 and put $20,000 into it and sell it for 90 or 100 or something like that. Mm-hmm. And so I actually started flipping houses on the side.
Where's this at? South Texas?
Kingsville, Texas.
Kingsville.
Yeah, South Texas. It's outside Corpus Christi.
Mm-hmm. Were you at that Navy base in Corpus?
No, there's a jet base in Kingsville.
Gotcha.
Yep. But there is a training base in Corpus too. And so I just flipped these houses, and it was all, at the time I was doing it all myself, right? My dad was a carpenter. I was like, anything I don't know, I can YouTube and figure out. And so, just flipped a couple houses on the weekends and evenings whenever I had free time and knocked it out and made some good money. And I was like, okay, I think this is what I want to do. So I got out of active duty, and we were going to stay in Kingsville, but we wanted to get to a better place. We just had kids. We wanted better schools. And so we moved up here to Austin and for the school system. Okay, cool. And
when was that?
Ooh, you're going to throw dates at me. 2012.
Okay.
Maybe.
From Kingsville to Austin, 2012? Yep.
I think that's right.
Where at in Austin did y'all move to?
We're out by the lake, in Lakeway.
Okay.
Yeah.
And so did y'all know anybody, or what made y'all choose Austin out of all the school districts in Texas?
My wife went to UT. So she wanted to go move either to San Antonio or Austin. I went to both. Like, I went and I was like, oh, we're definitely moving to Austin.
Nice. Yeah. I don't blame you.
Yeah, I was not a big fan of San Antonio. So.
Okay. So then you came here, and then you were going to start trying to flip houses here. Was that the plan?
Yeah. So that was the original plan, but my wife said, no, you're going to get a real job first. Mm-hmm. So I went over on Southwest Parkway, AMD, the chip makers. Okay. Mm-hmm. I went and worked for them for a year. And then my buddy, who I deployed with, he came up to me. He's like, "Hey man, let's start a house flipping business." I was like, "Yes, let's go do that." And he was even more nerdy than me. And we put together a 100-page PowerPoint business plan so that we could give it to our wives,
convince them it was a good
convince
idea.
them that we can go and go do this thing full time.
That's awesome.
So the wives agreed after about 50 pages. They said, just stop talking.
You guys are very serious and detailed. We're good.
But it's interesting is we both put our notices in. He actually moved, I think he was in Houston, moved to Austin, bought a house. And the first month or second month while he was here, I was still working at AMD. He's like, "Hey man, by now we should have bought 1.5 houses and we don't even have anything on the books." He's like, "I'm out." He's like, if we can't hit our goals, then I'm out. And I was like, well,
How long was that?
I was still at AMD when he told me he was out. So he was probably doing it on his own for a month. The difference was I had the real estate experience. He didn't. So he was out there going to look at the houses that the wholesalers were posting and stuff like that. And he couldn't make the numbers work.
So after a month, he was just like, I got to go back to work.
Yeah. He was fearful that we wouldn't be able to meet the numbers.
And I imagine you having done it before, you're like, this is a game of being patient, and we'll make a lot of money. We don't have to make it tomorrow, but that's probably the mindset you had. And he's freaking out like, this isn't going to work. Is that kind of how it went down?
Yeah. And to be fair and honest to him, even when I did it, I didn't even come close to the numbers that were on that business plan. So
Did you, before you officially left AMD, did you tell your wife that he had bailed?
yeah, and that was actually a big conversation because when he said he was backing out, I went to her and I was like, listen, I still want to do this by myself.
Right.
And so actually I had a really good friend back from New England that I went to high school with, and we ended up partnering. He was my first investor and gave me his IRA and said, I'll be a whatever percentage partner in your company, go do it. And so that's how we started, was with his IRA.
Wow.
And self-directed IRA account.
That's awesome.
And so that was in 12 or 13 y'all started?
Correct. Yep.
And so do you still flip houses today?
I still have the ability to flip houses.
Let's flip an apartment complex.
Yeah, exactly. It's kind of getting bigger now. For me, I've been looking for something that I could scale, and I tried to scale the house flipping business, and I couldn't do it at that time. Mm-hmm. I didn't have the right processes and stuff in place, and it sounds funny, but you think you can just go out there and hire all the right people, but the good people are out there. I feel the good people that could be part of your team are already out there either doing it or they're going to be doing it very shortly. Mm-hmm. And so you're kind of stuck with the other people that there's a reason that they're lower priced, and they might do good quality work, but they're not going to show up on time every time. And
right.
You don't really want them to be part of your team unless you can have a very good process for them where they come in and they have a checklist of things that they have to do to get paid.
Right.
And so for me, I didn't have that process in place where they could just, I could have the painter come in and, hit these 10 checklist items and then you can get paid. Mm-hmm. And so I couldn't build that out. I didn't have the right people underneath me. And I was just burning myself out by flipping 7 or 8 houses at a time. And so for me, I couldn't scale that business. And I had to go back to my buddy Paul in Massachusetts and say, hey man, we need to think of something different because I'm wearing out here. Mm-hmm. And so we scaled back a little bit. After I looked at the houses that I was flipping, most of them were making money, 20, 30 grand, but it was taking 8-9 months to make that 20 to 30 grand. And so much of my time, it really wasn't worth it at the end. Maybe if it was like my first one, I was making some money, it was worth it. But when you're trying to do a bunch and live off it and grow, I wasn't growing. I think that's the biggest thing. Right. I was just grinding at that point.
You were working a job. Yeah. That's what I've always been scared of flipping. Is like it's great, but it's like to me it seems like you just work yourself into a job. Yeah. Unless you have some kind of really good process and system.
Yep. Yeah, I agree with that.
Was 20-30 grand a good profit on a flip?
I'd say that was probably, without looking at the numbers, it's probably the lower end. I'd say usually I was making 40, but it was the ones that were really moving the needle there's some that you make, 6 figures on.
Mm-hmm.
And those ones were usually the easier ones. And I usually knew it right off the bat when I got that one. I was like, this is the cash cow, baby. I'm not going to be able to flip this one in 2 months, and make $150,000.
Nice.
And
you ever wholesaled anything?
oh yeah, yep. I bought wholesales. I've sold wholesales.
What do you like more, wholesaling or flipping?
Wholesaling is much easier, but it's kind of a weird situation for me because it's interesting. Because what I don't like about wholesalers is they always overprice the value of the house or the ARV. They always tell you that it's only going to cost you $15,000 to fix it, right? Look, you could do this in 3 months and make this much money.
Mm-hmm.
And everyone that goes to buy a wholesale, they all know that wholesalers inflate the price and underestimate repairs. So I try to do it different, right? I was like, I'm going to be different. I'm going to be the wholesaler that goes out there and tells them the real price,
right,
and the real expenses,
mm-hmm.
and the real profit margin. And guess what? No one ever bought my wholesales because they're like, I could go make 75 flipping this house or 30 flipping Brian's house. I'm going to go do the 75, even though those numbers are inflated. And they're still going to make more money on mine.
Yeah.
They just don't know it yet.
That's interesting. And we've done probably like 6 or 7, and usually like larger deals, apartments or warehouse projects. And we never really get into any kind of estimates. It's like, here's the price.
Yeah.
And I think if you're doing a single family at scale, maybe you have to do something like that. But I almost feel like I wouldn't do that either, because it's like, why am I going to tell you all the numbers? Like, I'll just tell you the price and figure out all the numbers on your own.
Well, that's interesting because I got an email over the weekend, and I responded to the wholesaler.
Mm-hmm.
I said, you want me to give you $3,000 non-refundable before I can even go inside the house to inspect it?
Yeah.
And he's like, yes. I was like, you don't see where that's a problem?
That's another thing. I have these little pet peeve, I guess, or thoughts of a lot of people, they just try to do what the standard is.
Yeah.
Like, all these wholesalers are like, they tell the sellers, we'll pay all the closing costs. I'm like, why do they do that? Why didn't, they just pay their own closing costs and you pay your own? And why is it $3,000 to $5,000 hard for every single person? Maybe just because a couple of the big companies do it.
Yeah.
There's so many people that are new that are trying to do it. It's like, no, I'll give you just a regular option check.
Yeah.
And a lot of times these guys or girls are not even selling these deals, and they're trying to stick to this process that everyone else does. You know what I mean?
Well, of course, you're brand new. You don't know what else to do, so
Right.
you copy your competition.
Sure.
I mean, that's
Yeah.
how I started everything too.
If you're not getting a deal done, like, what's the point?
That's true.
Yeah. So I don't know. It's an interesting business. But so when you were wholesaling, I'm assuming you were not running a wholesale business. You were just looking at the deal and then keeping all options open and seeing if the wholesale or the flip made sense.
Yeah.
And just going based on the numbers.
Yeah. Usually when I was wholesaling was because I was doing too much at the time, and so it was just an extra project that I didn't want.
Yeah.
Or like I said, it started getting too small. I started only looking at those bigger cash cows and saying, hey, I'll give away this $50,000 project and only make 20 on it or 15 on it.
Right.
But I don't have to do any work.
Right.
And so
That's why I asked what you like better, because a lot of stuff that we look at, I mean, we could buy and flip ourselves, but we'd be locking up, 80 in capital. We'd be working on it for 4 months or however long it takes, and maybe make 30 to 50 grand, or just wholesale it right now with no time, no money invested in it, and make 20, 25 and go do another one.
Yeah. What I find is that I think a lot of the gurus are selling the wholesaling thing right now. And I don't know anyone that's doing full-time wholesaling. They all come in and try to do full-time wholesaling, and it's hard. I mean, we're in a hot market here, and you're a brand new investor coming in, and you're competing with guys like us that have been doing it for
Yeah.
Years and years and years, and we have all the experience, and when you send us the lead, we probably have already seen it for 2 or 3 months, if not longer.
Right.
It came across our desk a long time before you found it as the newbie investor that saw it on a foreclosure list on Zillow or something.
Right.
So
it is interesting. And then these people jack up prices, and
yeah.
I almost always, I've got this thing where like, I believe in just almost making an offer on every property, at least at the price that I want it.
Yeah.
So like, I mean, I'll get these emails. They're like 380. I'm like, I'm at 260. I say something every time.
I started to do that for a while.
Yeah.
I stopped responding to those emails.
Yeah, I hear you. But they a lot of times they're trying to jack it up so crazy, and they're like, how about 280? I'm like, man, you were trying to make a lot right there.
Of course, man. Why not?
Yeah, no, I'm all about it. Hey, make as much as you can.
My favorite wholesaling story is what was it? I called a guy because he was trying to sell something on Craigslist, and then found out that he was trying to resell my wholesale.
To you?
Yeah, to me.
Nice.
How much was he marking it up?
It was only like 10 grand, but it was still funny. He's like, "Oh man, this is a great house." Blah blah. I was like, "Have you ever been in that house?" And so I started to mess with him pretty bad because I knew it was my house.
So you were wholesaling a property, and he was trying to wholesale your wholesale.
Yeah, he
Back to you.
Yeah, so he came in. He's like, "Hey man, I got all these wholesales. I got all these leads. Blah blah." I was like, "All right, well, tell me about it." And my wife loved this guy because I have a bad habit where I put everything on speakerphone because I hate putting phones up to my ear. Mm-hmm. And so my wife hears everything, and she hates real estate by now. But she loved this guy because he was like this old Southern drawl guy, and like he would just come up with these sayings that would just make you laugh. Like I couldn't even talk because I was laughing so hard. He's like, "Oh man, I got the best deal in the world. Got this one over Piccadilly Square." And I'm like, "Oh, that's interesting because that's mine." And so I found out what the guy was doing was he was out there, instead of finding his own deals, he was finding all the wholesales and repackaging them and trying to sell them.
We had someone doing that right now on one of our apartments.
Yeah.
And then I started talking to the buyer. He's like, "Well, we've already been negotiating, and this is the price." I'm like, "This guy's not part of this deal. None of that matters." And he's like, "But we've already done." I'm like, "You don't get it. This guy's trying to scam you or something,
That's funny.
Yeah, he doesn't have it under contract. He has no say in the matter.
Yeah, let's just start over.
You've been negotiating with the wrong person.
Yeah.
So I mean, now you got a pretty big hard money company.
So what led you in there? The flipping, kind of getting exposed to hard money, or what piqued your interest in?
So, like I said, I called Paul and I said we need to scale back. Yeah. We only need to look at these bigger projects when they come across. Otherwise, you're going to lose me as a partner because I'm getting old real fast. Mm-hmm. And so when I scaled back, we were sitting there. We had all our capital sitting in the bank account that we had made off all those flips, and we weren't putting them to work. I was just waiting for those good wholesales, and I was going out trying to find them. And as with all the networking, I'd have someone like, "Hey man, can I borrow 20 grand? I have this house under contract. I just flipped it. We're gonna close in a week, but I have to put a new septic system in, and it's gonna cost me 20 grand." And there's $150,000 worth of profit at the end, and we close next week. I borrow 20 grand, and I'll pay you 30 next week. And I was like, "Yeah, of course, right?" And so that was actually my first lending deal, and those small things started happening more and more and more. And so I sat back and I was like, maybe I could be a lender. This looks like something I could scale because it took none of my time and I made $10,000. Now looking back on it, we did everything wrong, right? He didn't know how to borrow money the right way. I didn't know how to lend money the right way. We broke all kinds of usury laws because neither of us knew. Mm-hmm. We're just trying to make the deal happen. Mm-hmm. And it was benefit for both of them, right? Because he was about to lose the whole deal anyways. So that's when I was like, well, let me look into this. And, being an F-18 guy, like I'm very into detail. So I started looking at all the lending laws and the Texas property code and studying it. And I got every single deed of trust that I could get my hands on. And I, studied them line by line to figure out, hey, what does this line mean? Why is it in the deed of trust? Who's it protecting, the banker or the borrower, right? And kind of put together my own deed of trust based on, and just completely nerd out on it and said, okay, now I'm ready to lend.
Nice.
Wow, this is going to be a lot harder because there's a lot of laws that we have to obey by. So, and I remember, as I started to do it, I got into the game by doing a lot of second liens and gap financing because, those are the smaller amounts. Because there might be a hard money lender out there doing a $500,000 loan and someone needed $20,000. Well, I can't do the 500,000 because we only got $1 million in the bank account, so I don't want to just do 2 loans, and so I do these $20,000 loans and a bunch of them. And it was interesting because the people that I was behind lending money to, like I'd have conversations with them. I was like, well, this is okay because this lien's irrelevant. And they're like, well, sometimes they are, sometimes they're. I was like, yeah, I know. Sometimes they are, sometimes they aren't. In this case, it's an aren't. He goes, well, that's up to the attorneys to decide. I said, no, look at this property code right here. He goes, so this guy was in charge of a multi-million-dollar hard money lending company and didn't know the difference between the first lien and the second lien, or like a mechanic's lien versus
weird.
And so it just baffled me that people can be in that space and just not know their own shit, really.
They're just making money and not thinking much about it.
So, that's how I got into lending, was doing these small things, right? And I learned a lot of lessons because you lose a lot of money doing second liens, especially when you don't know what you're doing.
Really?
So
just because they don't pay them back, or what?
Man, there's so many things that can go wrong. To be honest, you have to have the ability to get. For me, I still do second liens, by the way, and I still do gap financing for right people. In fact, that's probably the majority of people that come to my website are guys looking for that stuff. But it has to be the perfect scenario to be able to do a second lien.
And what is that?
So it has to be something that's in and out. So for me, what I'll say is, if you're looking, don't call me asking for a second lien if it's your first deal and you're just looking for down payment on a hard money loan.
Right.
Because now I'm taking this massive risk and there's nothing to mitigate it, right? But I will lend to you if you've flipped that project and it's all the way at the end and you just need $50,000 to finish, and I can go and look and see that you've already put $100,000 into it. You got skin in the game. There's an end in sight in the next 2 months or something. Hey, now I'm going to look at that project and say, okay, does this make sense? So kind of my mindset is, if it's a new build, it has to be past framing, because that's the hardest inspection to get past. And so if you're past framing, it's all really plug and play after that, right? What cabinets do you want? What color do you want on the wall? And so that's the kind of stuff that I'll do a second lien on. But if you do a second lien, you have to have the ability to either cover payments of that first lien, or even worst case scenario, to be able to buy it out at full price. And so that was the lesson that I learned the hard way. Me and Paul was, we got stuck in a couple second liens that were supposed to exit pretty quickly, and they didn't exit because the realtor convinced him that he shouldn't put it on the MLS. They should let him sell it privately. And so there's a lot of realtors that do this, right? So they think that
the full 6% or something like that.
Yeah, I don't know what it is, but they sell them that there's this super off the market MLS that they all have. And of course, it always ends up going on the MLS, but so it doesn't sell for 3 months off the market. They finally put it on the MLS. The first lien's already foreclosing, and we end up getting wiped out because we don't have the money to be able to buy that first lien out or pay them off and take over. And so when that first lien forecloses, it wipes out all the liens behind them, and you have no say.
Really?
Yeah.
Every time?
Every time.
Unless something happens, right? Like unless that first lien position came in and just took the deed back, right? Then they would still owe you your money.
So are you talking about a deed in lieu of foreclosure?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So deed in lieu of foreclosure, and this is actually for those people that are first learning about lending. The difference is if you go through the foreclosure process, you wipe out liens. If you take a deed in lieu of foreclosure, you are accepting the deed to that property subject to all the liens.
Mm-hmm.
And so that's why you do not see a lot of lenders accept a deed in lieu of foreclosure, because you're taking on that risk that there could be mechanics liens, second liens, third liens, and stuff like that.
Right. Yeah, lending is interesting.
It really is.
Do
it's
you,
very complicated.
So now, how long have you had Hornet Capital for?
We've been in business about 3 years, and we've actually been lending a lot longer than that. So my previous company was called Tally 2 Investment Group. That's where we were doing all the flips and builds through. We started doing a lot of lending through there. What happened was I started having all these investors. You know, it starts off with your friends and family that, you know, start partnering with you, and then all of a sudden you start partnering with other local investors, and then they tell their friends, and so your network of cash investors start getting bigger and bigger. And I finally got to this point where we were doing everything one-off. So me and Matt, we would go lend on this property A, and then me and you, we'd go lend on property B and C. And then, you know, and then Matt would end up throwing a little bit of money into property C. And so it got really complicated really quick when you have, you know, 25 investors and 30 loans and 5 flips that you're doing, and who's in what and who gets to pay. What's so finally 3 years ago, I called a timeout, guys. And I said, listen, let's just do this right. Let's everyone mitigate the risk. I'm making everyone money. So let's pool all this together into a fund, and we all just make the same, right? Or we'll have different waterfalls. And so that's how I hired an attorney. She put together the fund paperwork, and then we just moved everyone and their assets into the fund, and then and now we're just a pooled fund.
Made it a lot easier.
Oh man! So that comes out with it's actually it is easier. And it actually protects the investors a lot more, because now instead of just being invested in one project or one property, it's over the whole portfolio. Mm-hmm. The harder thing is providing the same returns. Before I was making 30% returns for my investors, but the reason was that I borrowed the money the day I needed it, and I gave them back the day I didn't need it.
Got it.
Right, so it's kind of skewed.
Now you're sitting on the capital that you might not use.
Now I have to have liquidity reserves and all this stuff, and I have to that money's not making money when it's just sitting in the bank account. So it's a whole other animal dealing with the fund. But
who keeps the points? You or your investors or the fund or someone?
It changes so much. We have a lot of different capital sources. So what I mean by that is whether investors in the fund, or maybe someone can't be in the fund because they're not accredited, but they're outside the fund, but they still want to partner on that loan. So we have a way that they can partner on a specific loan, just like we used to do with Tally 2. Then we have public companies that invest alongside of us, and they have their own. They set the rules, right? Because they have the money. So, hey, these are our rules if we invest in your loan. So, whether or not we have to give them a spread of the points or something along those lines.
Well, I really love the idea of being the bank, getting the points, borrowing money, lending it back out for a higher interest rate, keeping, I guess, what it's referred to as the rake. Is that what it's called?
The spread, the rake.
The rake. I've always loved the idea of being a bank, and so it's really interesting.
So with that, it's interesting because what you always hear on the radio, right? What you hear right now is all the gurus talking about how to buy houses, no money down, right? The subject twos and stuff like that. And what they're really talking about is they're trying to teach you about wholesaling, or they're talking about how to buy a property subject to financing. But what you never hear about is all the other services that make money off that flip. And so one thing that I actually want to build out eventually is saying, hey, like if you wanted to get into real estate, you can do those things, right? But there's a lot of liability if you own a house for a day and then turn around and flip it, even though people don't think so, right? But hey, there's all these contracts you need to follow, especially if you do subject to stuff like that. Or wholesales, it's hard to find them because no one wants to sell their house at a discount. And then usually when you find them, you have a week to sell them, right? So that's a tough decision. And there's a lot of liability with it. What I want to do is I want to be like, hey, if you want to get into real estate, how about you go partner with me, right? So come partner with me and we'll do loans together. And when you do a loan with me, right, you'll get the points. No liability whatsoever, or we'll split the points, some kind of spread. And oh, by the way, we're going to teach you about it because when you bring us a loan, we're going to give you these 25 steps that you need to do to make sure that's a good loan. And go to this website, look at the deed of trust. Go to this website, see if there's any permits pulled, right? And so you're going to learn all about the Austin market and the exact websites to go to and exactly what to do to partner with us and to do due diligence on that property. And you're going to get all that as, a package, and then you get paid off it.
Right.
So you're learning like hands-on how to do it.
Getting paid to learn.
I think that's the way to do it. I think probably the problem is everyone wants to make the quick money and they don't want to go learn all the steps. But that's the way to do it.
That's my next step. That's my next growing step is to basically put together a package for newbies to say, hey, come be a bird dog for loans instead of a bird dog for properties.
Well, I think even I'm sure I'm like 100% sure even I could do that and learn a lot. I don't even think it would have to be newbies.
I think you're smart enough.
Do you?
Well, it's a whole different aspect. Like I've done real estate on the brokerage, management, buy, flip, but on the lending side is a new world. So even one little tip is extremely valuable.
Yeah, I agree with that.
Yeah.
Do you buy notes as well?
I have bought notes, yes.
And make them performing?
Yes, I've done that as well. I'm trying to think if I've ever sold a note, though. I don't think I've ever... Actually, yeah, I have sold notes. So, but that's not... There's a whole another aspect of real estate investing where you're buying and selling non-performing notes.
Right.
That's not what I'm in, but it happens, right? It's like wholesales. I'm not in buying and selling wholesales right now, but deals come across my desk and I'm like, okay, I'm going to wholesale this thing.
You see value.
Yeah.
Well, just like you said, I mean, everybody who, may want to get into real estate may hear about wholesaling or flipping houses or the BRRRR strategy, but there's, buying and selling notes too.
Yeah.
And there's just many different ways to get involved in real estate that you don't have to go and do what everybody else is doing.
I told my buddy Paul when he first started investing, he invested his IRA with me. I said, hey man, listen, this is where I think we're going, but we're going to pivot 100 times as we learn what works and what doesn't work. And if we end up selling bananas at the corner of 6th Street because that's the way to make the most money, that's what we're going to do. He's like, okay, I'm all aboard.
Good, I like that.
And so, that's always been our joke is, selling bananas if we need to. And like I said, I had started with one company. I've moved into Hornet.
Sure.
I started as a fix and flipper, and now I'm mostly doing loans, but, just picked up a multifamily property down in Manchac. Like, I just keep pivoting to wherever it is.
We're construction guys now.
That's actually something my long-term plan is to eventually do something like that. So hopefully you guys figure out, I'll just partner with you.
Come on. We love it, man. It's all about getting the right people.
Yeah.
Well, one of the things that I've always liked about what you're doing is the detailed and process-driven. What I was asking earlier about the objections, I told Alex about that a little bit, but when we were having lunch, you were saying like you object every time. And I thought that was fascinating.
Yeah.
It's just another way to know about real estate, to have an out on a contract.
Yep.
Can you maybe talk about that? And do you have any other like little things like that come to mind that you do as well?
Well, so what you're talking about is on a real estate contract, there's, you're basically agreeing to a bunch of things. As long as all these things line up that you're going to go forward with that purchase. So for me, we hear from the hard money, or not the hard money lenders, you hear from the gurus is, hey, give them a $10 option fee, right? And because that's all they need. And I started looking at it, I was like, why do I need there's if I read through this contract line by line, there's about 15, I don't know the number, there's about 15 different ways as I as the buyer can just back out and get my earnest money back.
Survey, title commitment,
all kinds of stuff,
disclosure.
right? And so just like I did with those deeds of trust where I put them all together, one day I went through there and I said, okay, what are all the ways I can get out of this contract? And I looked at them all and I was like, well, this is super easy. I can always, every single time, get out of a contract if I object to what the title company sends me. And guess what? They send me stuff that, well, sorry, I take that back. If the title company sends me something and I object to it, the seller has to cure it. So if there's like a very common example, let's say they have a mortgage on the property, right? I object to that mortgage being on the property when I buy it. All right. The seller has the right to cure that. How they cure it? By they pay it off when we close, right? But there's stuff on there that they can't cure. They're like, let's say that there's a 5-foot easement on the property, which most properties have 5-foot easements, right?
Right.
I object to that 5-foot easement. They have no way to cure that because it's in the deed restrictions, it's in the plats. They can't object to that.
Right.
So if I don't want to go through with that purchase, I object to that easement and I'm allowed to get out on that contract line.
Yeah.
So why do I need an option period? And so that's, a little tip to all you new people out there.
That's great.
Whose contract are they going to accept? Yours with a $10 option period or mine with no option period?
Right. That's amazing. So you'll object to it,
Yep.
but keep moving forward.
Oh, yeah.
And then if something comes up, then you'll be like, hey,
Yep.
I had this objection back then. I want out.
Yep. You remove the objection before you close.
We got to start objecting. That's awesome.
Yeah.
Are there any other things that come to mind like that? I mean, that's something. It was funny because we were meeting and we were with the title company guy. He's like, can't do that. And he's like, yes, I can. And it's like back to the whole, there's these little details. The more you get into it, the better you are. And,
Yeah.
I mean, that's, even a title company doesn't always. I mean, I feel like very few people know about that or talk about that for sure. I've never heard of anyone saying that.
Who was it? Do you know Guy? I'm going to mess up his last name. It's either Jimenez or Jimenez. Guy.
Don't know him, but seeing his name.
So he
around.
used to be up here in Austin. He's down doing awesome things in retirement down in Corpus Christi now, I think. But I used to hold a monthly meetup. And the meetup was just about education. And I would give away these tips I'd say, hey, here's what I do, right? And it was just me giving back every month. Now, COVID's kind of stopped that. And
Sure.
it was actually really hard to hold a monthly meetup because you always have to come up with topics and stuff.
We know.
we do 4 for our team. We've
Yeah.
got 47 agents. We do 4 calls a week.
Oh, wow.
And so we're like, we have that struggle multiplied probably.
It's
we're like,
it's
what
a
do we
struggle,
We
man.
got to bring someone on. Anyone got any questions?
Yeah.
Q&A.
I used to beg people like, tell me what you want to learn about and I'll teach you. But he came up and he's one of the few other people that I know that me and him can have talks about Texas property code and title commitments and stuff. And you just learn things as you go along too. Like I thought I knew everything about title commitments, and then I learned as a lender that this whole other thing that I can request that I didn't even know about that even protects me more, that only certain big banks do. And you just, who teaches you, or how do you learn about title insurance?
No, I mean, I had lunch with a lady that's at a title company yesterday. I'm asking her all these questions about the business and how they make money and how they start and all that stuff. But you're right. Nobody teaches you. And I got a master's degree in real estate.
Yeah.
Well, it seems like they don't really, certain people, whoever I've talked to in the past at title companies don't really know either. It's just like, oh, this is just how we do it. The
only people that know about title insurance are the underwriters. And do you think that they're going to teach you the tips and tricks to get around their system?
Right.
Hell no.
Right.
So there's no one. You have to dig into their terrible written code and to figure out what it is. And I've even brought stuff to title agents and said, hey, can I do this? And they're like, I don't know. I was like, well, what's this mean? They're like, I don't know. Let me talk to my underwriter. I just found out the other day that this is a big one for builders. If you're doing a new build and you're selling that property to a buyer at the end, and you don't need to get title insurance, you can get a binder for title insurance, which could save you thousands of dollars on your closing costs. Now you got to find a lender that's willing to do that, right? That's basically, it says the title company is saying, hey, in lieu of me selling you this $5,000 policy or premium to cover your $1 million spec build, we're just going to bind you for $200. And if you do need that insurance, you can pay us the $5,000 and we'll give it to you. But that's $5,000 that you don't have to pay at the closing.
It's just like the option to buy it if you need it.
Yes, yeah.
And it's only for new builds.
It's only for new builds. If you have, I forget the way it's worded. It's like it's new construction that the title company believes that you will use them to sell the house on the back end.
Interesting.
Yeah.
Well, that's big time.
Insurance is another business I've always been interested in too.
Yeah. I have a lot of really big ideas for insurance, but I can't find someone that can answer my questions. So if there's anyone listening to this podcast that is an expert in insurance, let me know, because I have a cool product that I want to put out for insurance, but I can't find. Do I talk to our underwriter about creating this new program or whatnot? So,
and when you were talking about the underwriters at the title company that aren't going to tell you stuff,
yeah,
what is it? Was it the binder? That was like the example. Are there other things that you do that save money?
Well, that's the thing. You don't know,
you
right?
Just don't even know.
So as the lender, I had to, first we talked about cheating, right? The wholesale where people just charge you $3,000 non-refundable.
Right.
And so you just copy what everyone else does.
Right.
When I first started lending, what do? I copy all the endorsements that all the other lenders were doing. Oh, they asked for a T31. Okay, I want a T31. I have no idea what it is, but I want that endorsement, right? And so at some point I had to go through and read through every single endorsement and create this crazy spreadsheet to say, these are the ones that I want in these situations. These are the ones I want in these situations. But there's no classes on it. There's no education. And so all the endorsements is additional coverage to your title policy. And so there's no one to kind of walk you through that, because no one's making money off selling title insurance.
Right.
So there's no one's ever going to teach you. You got to figure out yourself and read the details, which suck.
They do, but that's how you get value. You put in the work and put in the effort that other people don't want to do.
Yep. Trying to think of any. So your original question was, do I have any other tidbits like the objections?
The objections was new. That's new to me. I like that. I think we should definitely use that.
Yeah, if that's not part of your process, that's
it's not, but it will be.
It's like when we use Asana for all our task management, and as soon as the checkbox goes off that we've received the title commitment, the very next task that comes up is an automatic to go to the VA. Says create objection letter to send to title company. She checks that off. Next one pops up, send objection letter to title company.
And I'm sure you work with the same title company most of the time, so they get it versus.
No.
So I mean, when you do that, are they like?
They're like,
are they confused? Like,
what is this guy?
Are we backing out, or
what's this guy objecting to?
No,
5 foot easement.
No, I don't think so, because I think there are a handful of people that
do that.
They do that, and it's just not generally known, right?
Yeah.
So I might spill the beans and
I like it. Title company's going to be pissed.
Yeah. Yeah, because you don't have to release those objections till the day of closing. You're like, okay, I'm ready to close. I'll release those objections.
And you have a objection release letter.
Yeah.
Wow, that's cool.
So you object right after you get title commitment.
Mm-hmm.
Usually you have a period of time, right? 7, however long you write it into the contract to object to the title commitment.
Yeah, that's in the contract is how many days you have.
And then up until closing, so you put that objection out there, send a letter to title, and then you have until closing to either release that objection or back out?
Correct, yeah, because it's just one of my remedies to cancel the contract. And so if I want to cancel the contract and get my earnest money back, that's one of my outs.
Right.
That's really cool.
Another interesting one that a lot of people don't know is that if you go past the closing date, it doesn't automatically terminate a contract. The contract's still valid. The closing date is just an out for the seller to say, hey, you did not close on time, so now I'm backing out of this contract. Or even the buyer for that.
But if they still want to close.
Yeah, but if they still want to close, then you guys do an amendment and extend it.
And then, 99% of the time they do.
Yep, yeah.
Because they don't want to start over another
Correct.
45 days, whatever.
But there's a lot of people that, and I had to look into it, right, the first time that happened to me, that they think that the contract automatically terminates. And you find out the hard way, right? I think the reason I looked into this was I do a lot of consulting for people because I know the details. And someone came up to me and like, hey, I put a contract on this property 6 months ago, and it all just kind of went away. But now it's a really good deal because city changed its code or whatever. And they're like, do I have any rights under that original contract? And what we found out was the buyer or the seller never terminated that contract. So it was still enforceable.
Interesting.
Yeah.
Yeah, it can be a weird situation on the flip side because I was helping my buddy sell a house recently and kept extending. I'm like, we're kind of in no man's land. Like,
Yeah.
It was a week, another week, another week. We'd ask for a little bit more earnest money and all this stuff. But you kind of get trapped. You can get trapped in it a little bit if you want to sell.
Yeah.
Well, man, I know we got to get to the day, but what can be valuable for you, for listeners, us, right now, and how can people get a hold of you? Like, what's ways that we can add value for you and anyone else that might be listening?
Well, that's a good question. I mean, obviously, the company, my fund is Hornet Capital, and so we're always looking for investors that want to partner with us inside the fund.
How can people find Hornet Capital?
Our website's hornet.capital. There's no .com.
It's cool.
Some people say it's cool, and then
It's a pain explaining it to people.
Yeah, it really is.
I've had a few websites like absoluterecovery.support.
Yep.
And they're like .com? And
Yeah.
No, .support.
Same thing. Our email is, mine is at hornet.capital, and I'll get so many people that call me back like, it didn't go through. I was like, you put .com at the end, didn't you? They're like, yep. I was like, take that off, it'll go through.
Yeah.
So
hornet.capital is your website.
Yep.
And then any other way they can reach out and get in touch with you?
Well, I don't want to give out my phone number because it's already rings off the hook. But
I'm sure.
I'd say go through the website. There's phone numbers on there. You can get to us or emails. Nice. Brian at hornet.capital. And so if you're a cash investor that is looking to invest, you always hear the riches are in the niches. And so whatever a company's doing, that's their niche. We talked a lot about hard money lending, but my company actually doesn't just do hard money lending. We do anything. Our niche is Austin, really. So we do a large piece of our portfolio is hard money lending, but we'll do wholesales, we'll do fix and flips, we'll do whatever we need to do to make money. And it's an extension of what I do every day. And so it's basically people investing in my knowledge and my expertise and my history of providing returns for investors.
The fund does all of that?
The fund does it all.
Oh, that's
it's
really
all
cool.
under one.
That's really cool.
Yeah.
What are the returns are they monthly, quarterly payouts? How does it all look?
Yeah, we pay out every quarter. We actually made two different classes because I have two different kinds. I initially had two different kinds of friends. I had the friends that said, hey, I just want very standard 10% return. And so those are my class A guys. They get paid first. And then my Class B guys are more my guys like, hey, we're shooting for the moon. We want the, everything above 10%. And so they're my Class B guys. And we basically split after we pay our 10% quarterly to our Class A, we split everything 80-20 between my Class B and management. So for me to get paid, I need to pay my Class A guys 10% and pay my Class B guys the 80%, and then I finally get whatever's left over.
So the Class B guys take a little bit more risk.
A lot more risk, yeah, a lot more risk,
take
yeah.
8 times more risk.
Because they're not the preferred.
Yeah, they're not preferred. So we got paid. So there's been a quarter where they actually didn't get anything.
Right.
But then the next quarter they made, 5.5% or something ridiculous in one quarter. So on average, they've been returning a lot more than Class A.
Got it.
But they've had bigger swings.
And you could probably invest in Class A and Class B.
Yeah, we have some people that do both. We've had some people that, they invest their IRA into Class A, and then they'll put their fund money kind of in Class B.
That's cool.
Yeah.
Very cool. That's interesting. I don't think there's many companies that are doing that, and especially in Austin.
Yeah, it makes it hard to sell, because most people, they'll say they want the money machine. They want to know that I'm just a hard money lending company,
right.
And that if I do 10 loans, that they get this amount of spread and it makes exactly this much money. They don't like the idea that I can go and pivot and do other things that are unknown to them and they're unknown to me.
Right.
But like a great example where this model really works out is look at COVID, right? So COVID happened in January and February. We had our 2 best months ever. I mean, we just crushed it in the hard money loans. And then March we had 0.
Right.
And there was no loans to give out.
Sure.
And every other hard money lender is calling me, asking me if I have any leads. And we were able to pivot and ask our investors, hey, investors, they didn't want to do any hard money loans. They're like, hey, let's pump the brakes. I'm going to save my money because there could be potentially some great deals on the side. And so I was able to take what my investors wanted and say, okay, you know what, I'm going to go find some distressed properties right now instead of focusing on hard money loans.
Yeah.
And that's how we went and picked up that man check deal.
That's awesome.
And so now that's probably going to be our biggest boost to our, on top of everything else that we're doing. If we can turn that property around, that's going to be massive for my Class B guys.
That's really cool.
Yeah.
That's really cool. It's unique.
So the idea that I sell is that no matter what the market is, Hornet Capital still should be happy because on an upbeat market, we're selling loans. On if it goes down, we'll be able to buy distressed property with all our capital. And so it's kind of like you said, it's fun being the bank, right? When you have the money, you can make those awesome offers that people can't turn down.
Right.
Hey, here's a cash offer with no option period.
Yeah, and I can see how that's a hard sale to investors when they don't really know you. But when they get to know you and understand the sophistication, then you're like, oh, this is way better.
Yeah. Well, I think for the deeper pocket guys, what they really wanted to see was a track record. They can hear my background,
Sure.
Military F-18 guy. They can hear, I can talk, a good game, but they wanted to see the track record of past returns.
Sure.
And interestingly enough, I tried to show them the returns from my old company, Tally 2, which we were doing the exact same things, right? It was basically people trusting in me and doing that. But they don't care about those returns. They just said, well, Hornet Capital started 3 years ago. Let's see that. Well, now I have 3 years of track record. So now it's people are really coming to me and saying, hey, I'm ready to jump in now.
That's awesome.
So,
Congrats, man.
yeah, it's fun.
We appreciate it, and hopefully we'll get some investors from this, and keep playing the long game. And I think, we could talk for hours.
I know.
There's a
it's
lot.
fun.
Sake for the day, we all got to get back to work, so we appreciate you coming by and adding the value, and always appreciate it.
Sure. Thanks, guys.
It was good meeting you, Brian.
All right.